In the heart of Vermont, where the winter snow blanketed the earth like a soft white quilt, Mary, a 78-year-old widow, lived quietly in her weathered cottage. Her days were a gentle rhythm of tea brewing, knitting by the window, and gazing at the forest where the pines swayed. Life had grown silent since her husband passed away, leaving only the echoes of laughter that once filled the home. Loneliness was a quiet companion, one she had learned to live with, yet never embraced. One frosty evening, as the wind howled against her windows, she baked her famous honey bread, an old family recipe. Something in her heart stirred, an urge to share rather than keep. Wrapping a loaf in a faded kitchen towel, she placed it on her porch with a note, "For whoever needs it." She closed the door, thinking little of it, unaware that this simple act would set forth a ripple of kindness that would soon transform not only her own life, but the lives of many others. That night, as the snow fell heavier, the bread sat waiting, like a beacon of quiet generosity in the cold, ready to warm the hands and hearts of a stranger. The next morning, John, a weary single father, trudged through the snow, his coat too thin for the bitter wind. His little daughter, Emily, held his hand tightly, her cheeks red from the cold. They had been struggling ever since he lost his job at the factory, scraping by with little food and many worries. As they passed Mary's porch, John noticed the loaf of bread, its sweet aroma drifting even in the freezing air. At first, he hesitated. Was it meant for someone else? But the note read clearly, "For whoever needs it." With a mix of relief and gratitude, he picked it up, and Emily's eyes sparkled with joy. That evening, he knocked gently on Mary's door, the warm loaf still in hand, half eaten yet deeply appreciated. Mary opened the door, surprised but smiling, as Emily shyly thanked her for the bread. A simple conversation began, a few words about the cold, the bread, and life's hardships, and something shifted in Mary's heart. For the first time in years, a connection had been made. That night, Mary wondered if perhaps her small gesture had found its purpose. Days passed, and Mary found herself thinking about John and Emily often. There was a quiet joy in knowing her bread had filled their stomachs, and perhaps their spirits too. One chilly afternoon, she knitted a small scarf and left it outside with another loaf of bread. Then came jars of soup, small notes with kind words like, "You are stronger than you think." To her surprise, the gifts were always gone by morning, and sometimes she found a thank you drawing from Emily in return. Soon, her small acts of kindness became a routine, quiet, anonymous, and deeply fulfilling. Yet, the town began to whisper about the mysterious giver. A journalist from the local paper caught wind of it and decided to investigate. Who was this old woman who left warm food and thoughtful notes on cold nights? As Mary sat by her fireplace, unaware of the growing curiosity, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. It wasn't about recognition, it was about purpose. Each loaf of bread, each scarf, was more than a gift. It was a message. Someone cares, even in the silent corners of winter. What began as a simple act of kindness soon grew into a quiet movement within the small Vermont town. Neighbors started noticing the warm bread, the scarves, the notes, and word spread of the mysterious giver. Children whispered stories of a winter angel, while shopkeepers left small gifts in return. People who hadn't spoken to each other in years began sharing stories about her kindness over cups of coffee. One evening, a group of townsfolk knocked on Mary's door, their arms full of flowers and groceries, simply wanting to meet her and thank her. Mary, though shy, invited them in, her heart fluttering at the sudden attention. Her little cottage, once so still and lonely, was now filled with laughter and the aroma of shared meals. Yet, she worried. Would this attention spoil the simplicity of giving? Would kindness lose its purity if people expected it? As the night ended and the guests left, she sat by the window, gazing at the snowflakes dancing in the moonlight. Perhaps, she thought, kindness was like those snowflakes, meant to fall where it may, never asking where it lands, only hoping to bring beauty to those who pause to see. One chilly morning, as the first hints of spring began to melt the snow, Mary received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar yet aged, and when she opened it, tears welled in her eyes. It was from Clara, a woman she had once taught as a little girl, decades ago. Clara wrote of a time when Mary had shared her lunch with her, a simple sandwich that had kept her going through a dark period at home. That small act of kindness, Clara wrote, had saved her from despair and given her the courage to believe in good people. Now, Clara was a mother of 3, living in another state, and facing a challenge of her own. Her daughter was ill, and they needed hope more than ever. Clara asked if Mary could write her daughter a letter, the way she once wrote to her students, reminding them that life had kindness waiting for them. Mary folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling. It struck her how the simplest act, even from years ago, could echo into the future. That day, she sat down at her desk, her pen ready, her heart full, knowing her words could once again light a path for someone. Winter returned with a fierce storm, blanketing the town in heavy snow and cutting off power for days. Darkness wrapped around the homes, and fear settled in as temperatures dropped. Mary, wrapped in her shawl, looked out at the flickering lights and knew people would need warmth. She lit every candle she had and opened her door, placing a sign outside. "Come in, let us share what we have." One by one, neighbors arrived, families, children, even John and Emily. They gathered in her living room, sharing bread, soup, and stories. The room glowed with candlelight and laughter, the storm raging outside forgotten for a moment. That night, Mary felt something she hadn't in years, a deep, unshakable joy. It wasn't the storm that mattered, nor the cold, but the warmth of people coming together. As she looked around at the tired yet smiling faces, she realized the secret to happiness wasn't hidden in wealth, or youth, or solitude. It was in togetherness, in open doors and shared hearts. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, a miracle had already begun. With spring's arrival, the town decided to honor the woman who had quietly changed their lives. On a warm morning, they gathered outside Mary's cottage, now surrounded by budding flowers. Children held balloons, families carried baskets, and John stood with Emily, their smiles wide. The mayor stepped forward and unveiled a small garden beside her home, filled with tulips and daisies, and a bronze plaque that read, "The Garden of True Happiness," in honor of Mary. Mary, though frail, stood before them, her voice trembling yet clear as she spoke. "Happiness isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. It's in the bread you share, the hand you hold, the kindness you choose every day." The crowd applauded, some wiping away tears, others smiling with a sense of belonging they hadn't felt in years. For Mary, it wasn't the recognition that mattered. It was the love that bloomed around her, proof that one small act could plant a garden of joy in many hearts. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat by the window again, the garden swaying gently, her heart at peace that a year later, the cottage by the woods stood quiet once more. Mary had passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hands folded over a small knitted scarf. But her legacy did not fade with her absence. The town took over the cottage, turning it into a place where people could leave gifts, food, and letters for those in need. Children visited every weekend to plant flowers and bake bread in her old kitchen. John's daughter, now a teenager, started a kindness program in her school named Mary's Garden, teaching others to share without expecting. Travelers from nearby towns came to see the plaque, to read her story, to feel the warmth of a woman who once gave without asking. The bread, the notes, the scarves, each one had been more than an object. They were seeds, and now they had blossomed everywhere. Mary's secret to true happiness lived on, not in riches or fame, but in the simple truth she had always known. Love given freely multiplies, and kindness never dies. And in the quiet of the Vermont evenings, when the wind passed through the garden, it almost felt as though she was still there, smiling.